everyone! So for today's video, I am going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in May. So as per usual, let's jump into some of the statistics. I read a grand total of 5 books in May and about 1,652 pages. One of the books was a classic, one was historical fiction, 2 were science fiction, and then 1 was a thriller. I had 2 3-star reads, 1 3.5-star read, 1 4-star read, and 1 5-star read. So overall everything was kind of in the higher ratings. 5 of them were physical books, 3 were adult, and 2 were YA. And as for the years that they were released, we have a 2019 release, 1812, 1994, 2016, and 2017. So it's all over the board there. So the first book that I read in May was actually one of my most anticipated releases for the year, and that was Romanov. This is a book all about Anastasia and her family. For the majority of this book, we follow her and her family while they are being held captive, and while this book is based on fact, it does have a lot of fictional elements to it. So in this book, she has this Russian doll that is magical, and in each layer of the doll is a different spell that she is told she has to use at just the right time in order to save her family. And at the same time, she ends up forming a bond with one of the Bolshevik soldiers. So I actually just want to read you a little thing of the synopsis on the inside, because the way that it's worded is what really gripped me into reading this book. So this is just going to be a small portion of it. So it basically talks about how she has growing attraction to Zash, I think is how you say his name, and it says she likes him, she thinks he might even like her, that is until she's on one side of a firing squad and he's on the other. And when I read that in the bookstore, I knew that I had to pick this up. Not only is it a really interesting premise on its own, but I've also always had a fascination with Anastasia and her family, not just like being a big fan of the like animated movie, but I remember as a kid I wrote a report on her life once for school because I was just so fascinated with it and the idea of how some people thought that she might have been alive. Like I said, this was one of my most anticipated releases for the year, and unfortunately I wasn't as impressed with it as I thought I was going to be, but I did give it a 3.5-star rating, so it was still a very good book for me. The first half of the book was definitely my favorite. I really liked the romance and love interest in it. It's a very slow burn romance. If you like that kind, I would definitely recommend picking this book up. And for the first half of the novel, it actually stuck very closely to the original story, down to like very specific details. Obviously like the magic elements and the romance and stuff is fictionalized or whatever, but some of the like very specific details I noticed were true to the original story, which I definitely appreciated. But then the last half of the story is where it goes completely fictional, and it goes a lot more down the magical path that I just wasn't really into. I didn't really like the magical elements of this story. I kind of would have just preferred a novel about her life that was maybe a little bit more fictionalized with romance or whatever, but I didn't really like where the second half of the story went and the magic and everything in it. That being said, I still did really enjoy this novel, and I would definitely recommend to pick it up because it was still a really, really good book. The next book that I read was Rapunzel by the Brothers Grimm. This was just like 4 pages long or something like that. I ended up giving this a 3.5, 3-star rating, I guess. I have pretty much loved every single one of the classic fairy tales that I've read by either the Brothers Grimm or Hans Christian Andersen or whoever, but this one for some reason just didn't have the same touch for me. I think it just went by way too fast, and there were some parts of the story that didn't actually make sense, like how we got from here to there. Didn't really understand, so I didn't like this one quite as much, but it was still good. The next book that I read in May was Jedi Search by Kevin J. Anderson. This is the first book in the Jedi Academy trilogy. I have wanted to read some of the Star Wars books for a really long time, and I own a lot of them that I've picked up secondhand. So I own this completed trilogy, and I don't know if at one point this was ever canon. It definitely isn't anymore. This follows the like storyline of Princess Leia and Han Solo getting married, and they have the twins, and then they also have another baby called Anakin, and yeah, it's a totally different storyline to the one that we follow in the new movies, but I ended up giving this book a 3-star rating. I've logged my whole experience reading this book, so if you want to hear my thoughts in like real time, I will leave a link to that video up in the card in the corner. But yeah, this book was not that great. I feel like the best way I can describe this book is just being like Star Wars fan fiction. Like the writing isn't that great, it doesn't really have a big plot line, and the characters aren't very true to themselves, which is definitely the main kind of gripe I have with this book, because obviously these are characters that we all know very well. I've like grown up watching these characters, and so I want them to be portrayed correctly, but some of the stuff that they said in this book I could just never picture these characters saying. Yeah, they just didn't feel authentic, and that was a bit of an issue for me, but I did give it 3 stars because frankly it was just very entertaining. Like if you watch my vlog you'll know that I was just having a good time reading this book, and it's not that great, but yeah, I enjoyed my time reading it. I don't know if I will continue with the rest of the series. I think I might, just because they're such easy reads and I own all of them, so I may as well complete it. But yeah, I don't have a lot of thoughts on this, just that it was a funny time reading it. The next book that I picked up was Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is the second book in the Illuminae trilogy. I read Illuminae last month and I really loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, so I decided to quickly pick up this one, and I also gave this like 4.55 out of 5 stars. I'm not really sure exactly where my rating is landing because, to be completely honest, I don't want to give away any spoilers because obviously this is the second book in a series, but this book follows different characters than the ones in the first one. Like those characters are still, their story still continues on in here, but we mainly follow these 2 other characters, and I wasn't expecting that, so it was a little bit jarring when I started the novel and I had to like get used to these whole other characters. And so it took me a lot longer to get into this book than I did the first one, but after the story picked up and I did get into it and I absolutely loved the characters after that, I like really loved those parts. So it's hard for me to pick a rating because I feel like I enjoyed more of Illuminae as a whole, whereas this one it took me a lot longer to get into it, but then when I did I really loved it. So I'm kind of still determining my rating, but basically I loved it, so that's all you need to know. And the final book that I read in May was A Stranger in the House by Sherry LaPena. This is actually the second book by this author that I've read. The first one was The Couple Next Door. So yeah, this is an adult thriller novel. It's like a domestic thriller, I guess. I don't really like to go into synopsises for thrillers because I just feel like everyone should go into them blind. They're a lot better like that. I ended up giving this book 3.75 out of 5 stars. I felt kind of the same way about this book as I did about her first one, although I gave that one 3 out of 5 stars, so I did like this one a little bit more. But the thing about her books is that her writing is like very good. Like there's something incredibly engaging about her writing. Both of these books I've read in very short spans of time. Like this one I read in about 3 hours in like 2 sittings, and her other book I think I read in like 2 days, which is pretty fast for me anyway. So her writing is very engaging and she does have very good plot lines. I did like this plot a lot better than The Couple Next Door, and I enjoyed the twist in this one a lot more as well. But the thing in both of her books is that I have no connection to her characters at all. I either am not connected to them or I straight up just find them to be kind of dislikable, and as a very character-driven reader that is a bit of a problem for me, which is why I didn't give this book a higher rating. So as far as like the plot and the writing goes, this is like a very good book, and I think she is a very good thriller author, but her characters, I just don't care about them at all. Like they could all die at the end of the story, they could all end up in jail for something they never committed, and I would care less. So yeah, the characters were definitely a miss in this story, but as for everything else, like I said, the writing and the plot and all that, I really enjoyed it. And I feel like when I say like 3.75 out of 5 stars, people tend to just hear the 3-star point, but like this was almost a 4-star read, so I would definitely recommend this if you like thrillers. So those were all of the books that I read in May. Leave me a comment down below and let me know what your favorite book was that you read in May. Mine was definitely Gemina, if you couldn't tell from my review. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!
You hear that, Samson?